This podcast is brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
This is the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. I'm your host, Molly Troop, and today we're going to be talking with Reade Huddleston. He's worked at many different distilleries, a lot of craft, and a few maybe not so much craft. He has really been known in our industry as the guy at the conference who's raising his hand, asking an excellent question that may or may not be a stumper. Very excited to talk to him today about water, which is a highly underrated topic in our industry, as well as RTDs and a number of other topics as well. RMS Roller Grinder, they design and build quality roller mills and grain handling system for your specific distilling needs. From idea to installation, they can help with roller mills, augers, control panels, bulk storage, and more. RMS has the right equipment to help you increase your efficiency, simplify your process, and create a quality crafted product. Contact them today at rmsroller-grinder.com to work with our experts on your new distillery build or expansion. And omnibibulous means able or willing to drink almost anything. That's the attitude of the consumer you're trying to reach. They're omnibibulous. So how does your distillery remain competitive? Distillers must future-proof their business with a multi-segment production attitude to meet consumers with the right beverages for the right occasions. Encompass Production Cloud is a software designed to help you lead in the modern beverage industry. Now, the omnibibulous consumer is a good thing. Become future-proofed at encompassTech.com. Here with me today is Reade Huddleston. Reade has a really diverse background, and he's been in the craft spirits scene for quite a while. I'm going to let him do the honors of introducing himself.
Hi, my name is Reade Huddleston. I am the Director of Distillation and Spirits for Monster Brewing Company, and I've been in the craft spirits industry for, nigh on 13 years now, working in all sorts of facilities from small to big.
Awesome. Can you tell us the first facility you ever worked at?
Oh, okay. So the first job I ever had was not technically in distilling. The first job in alcohol beverage was not in distilling. It was a brewer. And I've kept very close to my brewer roots. I consider myself a brewing distiller or a distilling brewer. I don't know how to best put that. But the first facility I worked for was a place called Petticolas Brewing Company. And I got that job actually when I was under 21. Luckily, in the state of Texas, you can work in alcohol if you are under 21, as long as you have a parental guardian sign off on it. And I started off cleaning kegs, and I fell in love with the industry. And I was really quite lucky. I went to a liberal arts college that supported out-of-classroom learning experiences, and they called them Odysseys. It was a college called Hendrix College in Arkansas. And they actually paid me to be an intern there originally. And then from that, it kind of grew into me actually working for them.
Wow, that's amazing. I actually would really love your perspective on the technical side from going from brewing to distilling. And there's so many similarities and there's so many differences there. But if you wanted to speak a little bit about some of the technical challenges that you faced with that changeover.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was actually just having this conversation earlier today with brewers. I still work very closely with brewers. I work for a company that is a majority brewing company. However, we're getting into distilling, and we have it takes a certain mindset shift. The truth of the matter is brewers and distillers are very, very similar. We have very similar end goals. We have very similar things that we care about. But the things that aren't similar are drastically different. And you have to really be able to put yourself in a mindset of what your end goals are. I use an analogy relatively frequently when I compare brewers versus distillers. And I say, brewers, if you go bowling, a brewer is the guy that sits there and spends about 30 minutes lining up his bowl and really makes sure that the ball goes down the alleyway in the perfect way to hit the pins and get a strike. That's a brewer. A distiller also wants a strike. However, what they do is they don't really pay attention to how they're throwing the ball. They just throw the ball as hard as they can in a direction, and then they run down the alley and set up pins in front of the ball and try to make sure that the ball hits all 10 of the pins that they set up. It's a weird analogy, but I think it really is fitting. As a brewer, your goal is you kind of, as soon as you cast off from the brew deck, as soon as you move past the boil step, you're putting it in the hands of the yeast, you're putting it in the hands of your general processes and hoping that you get the product you're looking for. Whereas distillers, we have a lot of levers that we can pull all the way through the process. But the goal at the end of the day is to make something good, and you have to realize the difference between brewer and distiller. You have to realize brewers plan out and hope for the best. Distillers kind of plan, but try to make the thing become the best it can.
What I find fascinating too about those differences is, we've had people who have just come from distilling. We have people who have just come from brewing. And the biggest difference our brewers say is the level of cleanliness. Like, not to say that distillers are, operating in dirty facilities, but it's a different level of clean that you require, really.
Oh, no, absolutely. Cleanliness is, there's the old joke of cleanliness is next to godliness, and that is incredibly true for brewers. But cleanliness in a brewery is very different from cleanliness in a distillery. Distillers are, in some ways, dirty brewers. We don't sanitize traditionally, or we don't sanitize in the ways that brewers think of sanitation. And we don't worry about, we want a certain amount of infection. We want a certain amount of lactic acid bacteria. Whereas brewers, any infection is something bad, is something that you need to fix. Distillers, a certain base level of infection is not just expected, but required, is necessary to make a good product. We're a little like Belgian brewers in that. However, for those guys, they're looking for a specific in-flavor profile. For distillers, you want that lactic acid bacteria, you want that dirtiness, because it helps you pull another lever. It helps you change your product in a way that you want it to change. And then you can affect how it has changed it further down the line by your barrel aging, by how long you're aging, by your blending, et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely, right? We have years and years to work with a product and see it develop over time and see how, flavor from lactic acid bacteria affects our goal. But when you're brewing, you have, weeks, right? Where it's a very different high stakes thing. It's you are working with something and you're trying to get it right to your consumer. And so it kind of needs to be perfect, where we have room to play, time to play.
Brewers, if you think about the velocity of product, the shortest time a brewer can get from mash tun to final product is, we can argue here, but let's just say 2 weeks. You can get a product in 2 weeks. For whiskey especially, but even outside of whiskey, for distillers, the shortest time you can get it to a product is going to be months. Weeks maybe, but months, years. And the best thing, though, is that once you get that product to the consumer, it's done. It's finished. That is the product. Mm-hmm. For brewers, once you get that product to the consumer, the countdown starts. You're worried. In 6 months, in 6 months, that beer may not be the same product. In 6 months, that cider may not be the same product. Anyone that's doing a fermentation without a real biologically deactivating step before the consumer is going to have to put a best before date on their product. I mean, they don't have to always, but they need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And an IPA that's fresh brewed versus an IPA that's a year old is very different. So you need to be aware of that, and you need to be thinking, okay, how do I get the product to the consumer in the best possible way, in the quickest possible way, and make sure that we don't have too much excess to make so that they don't get, you minimize the chance of them getting something that is older.
Right. So it's a lot of production scheduling from their part. I think it's really interesting to compare that element of brewing to then RTDs for spirits, right? Because that's probably the most similar in terms of cleanliness, in terms of shelf stability of any product that a distillery could produce. You're dealing with a lot of the same circumstances. You're trying to look for shelf stability. You're trying to navigate all these different, how your consumer is going to face your product in 6 months or a year. And that has its own unique challenges. But I think it's interesting from a distiller's perspective of that thought process.
Oh, yeah. Well, distillers, as I said, distillers aren't used to having the countdown clock of when their product goes out, it still being good. You put a bottle of whiskey on the shelf, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's still good. It's still basically the product you shipped out. Whereas if you're looking at an RTD, though very rarely are those not biologically active on some level. So there is the chance of flavor drift. There's the chance of not getting the ideal product per se. And you have to find your comfort level in relation to the consumer. You have to decide, okay, when do I call it? When do I make sure that the consumer is not getting something that is not what I want, not what I intended? And how do I control to make sure that consumer doesn't taste it?
Right. And a lot of that has to do with stress testing. Is there any kind of stress testing that you've worked with before that you could recommend?
So there's a lot of options out there. The easiest thing is something that's comes from kind of the brewing world, which is just high temperature, high heat, rapid aging tests. So what you do, and it's very simple as a distiller, you find a warm space, probably your boiler room. You take your product and you put it in there, and you check on it every couple of days, every week, it depends on really how long you're looking for, but you put enough of it down, or you put enough of that product down in this hot space, and you see how it kind of ages over time, because heat speeds up chemical reactions. Heat speeds up everything. You can also it's recommended that if you're doing a heat, like, a heated rapid aging test, you also do something in a cooler just to see the difference and taste the difference. Be like, okay, well, if it's cold, when does it go bad versus if it's hot, when does it go bad? Mm-hmm. And you might be even surprised that sometimes the cold goes bad faster than the hot, or goes off faster than the hot, just because of weird things. That's not going to be the standard. But
I'm going to say, tell me more about those weird things.
Well, I've seen it happen in the sense that, like, if you have a product that is still fermenting, this is not the standard. You wouldn't expect it, but you have a product that is still fermenting, or you have a lot of yeast that are still active in your finished product as you canned it, and then you put it in the cold, and the yeast suddenly go below their optimal active temperature, but you have an infection of something that is able to act at that low temperature. There is a true possibility that microbe, that organism, or that spoiling effect may go faster than if you go really hot, and you're still within your active profile of your yeast, not within the active temperature availability of that spoiling microbe. Very, very rare, but I have seen it happen.
Oh my gosh. That's fine. That's science that's fascinating, right? Like that's something that you discover that's very unexpected. So in that way, it's kind of exciting, even though it's not really the results you want to see.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely throws you for a loop, but that's what science is. That's what a lot of this industry is go out and see, go realize the things you expect to happen don't always happen. So be prepared for it and understand how to react in all situations.
Right. I think multiple times this week I've used the phrase, the difference between science and fucking around is writing it down, right? Like you're supposed to get creative and make mistakes and then learn from them, but definitely document.
Yes, always document.
So one of my ingredients that, we've experimented with RTDs before. We've looked into like different kind of preservation techniques and things like that. And I find Velcorin to be a fascinating ingredient. Have you ever worked with that ingredient before?
Velcorin, personally, no. I know people that have, and I've seen it used in effect. This is again a perfect example of the go out and see principle, or the difference between science and messing around is writing it down. Velcorin is it's new, or maybe I don't know the history of it, but it's new to our scene, and we don't really know what it does. What I can tell you is that Velcorin has become very popular with cider. That's been it's been a long, I would say long established. It's been a relatively well established microbial control method for cider. It is not normally used in other fermented beverages or even in spirits. There are things that you may add that may affect its effectiveness, may lower its effectiveness, or heck, even increase it. The other thing with Velcorin is that it takes some time to dissipate. You cannot serve a product immediately. Like, you can't just dose a product with Velcorin and immediately serve it. So you need to be very, very conscious of how long it takes before it has dissipated enough to serve. And you need to build into your process a holding time to make sure it's okay. Because Lord knows people
right off the line.
People are corner cutters. They will do things that are exactly right off the line. It is ridiculous. You'll see people that just do that, or you may think, okay, it's cool if I just ship it to a distributor, or I ship it somewhere, and then the distributor just says, oh well, let me pull a couple of cans, let me pull a couple of bottles to taste it right now, see what's up, and then they don't get a representative. At best, they don't get a representative sample of what you're trying to send them. At worst, it could be conceivably dangerous. Like I said, the effectiveness rating with Velcorin is very dependent on what you have in there. Just so you got to be aware of, like, okay, I'm adding this. Does this lower the effectiveness? Does this increase the effectiveness? Does this lengthen the amount of time that I need to hold this for? Does this lower it, et cetera, et cetera? All of these things. Just be very, very aware of. Any simple change is never really a simple change.
Right.
This is also true with just your cans. All cans have liners in them. We know that this is what we've had for forever. You need to be aware of what kind of liner is in your can, and can the thing that you're putting into that can work. I feel like I've said the word can way too many times.
Can your can work?
Yeah, can your can work? And there are companies many of the can companies will work with you and be like, hey, what are you adding? You don't have to tell us the exact numbers, but like you don't have to give away your recipe, but you do have to tell us what you're adding, and be honest with them, and then they can lead you to, they're not trying to, a lot of the times they're not trying to upsell you on anything. They're trying to be like, hey, we don't feel confident that this liner can withstand that pH or that level of oxidation, like these things. We think you should buy this. We would like to do corrosion testing with it, all sorts of things. The number of cans that I've seen out in the market, and not of just small brands, but big brands too, like that just have been corroded because someone felt that they could skip the corrosion test, or maybe not that they felt that they could skip it, but they just used the thing that was at hand without thinking about how it affected it.
Right.
It's mind-boggling.
And I have also wondered too, like, there know people who've worked, they've done like their due diligence, seemingly that they still had problems, and like the suspect at that time was that potentially a supplier sent the wrong liner. I don't really know if that happens. It would be very hard to know for sure without, some testing after the fact. But I mean, there's a lot of different variables that, you are trying to control to make a good product. And then if you don't, you can have some catastrophic failures.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the truth of the matter is you don't really know until you actually know.
Yeah. Yes. And that's like months after the fact.
Exactly.
Which is not easy when you're small.
No, it's terrifying. It can be a terrifying realization that, oh my goodness, the product that I thought was clear is hazy. That's an easy one. Or a much harder one to deal with is, oh my goodness, the product that I thought was stable and good is now exploding in consumers' hands. That's a terrifying realization. And you need to have every distillery, every facility producing products that goes out to people needs to have a valid recall plan. Needs to have something that they've stress tested and realize, okay, this is what we need to, this is how we react if we find out that there was a problem. And it doesn't mean that we made a mistake. It just means that there's a problem.
Right. Recall programs are really important and not widely discussed in our industry. Like, I think all of us really prefer talking about the creative element, and recall is a very real thing to need. But it's very necessary, especially with stuff that has shelf life stability, but even stuff that doesn't. Like, there's you need recalls for really anything that you're producing.
Absolutely. It's, even for traditional spirits, you can have a situation where the glass is just faulted. And, when they take the cork out, it chips and bits of glass get into your bottle. I hope that never happens to anyone. It's never happened to me, but I can totally believe that it is something that you need to be aware of and have a plan to address.
Exactly. Get your recall program under wraps. And with that in mind, we're going to switch just a second into talking about sponsors. Craft spirits makers know firsthand that the best ingredient is love. Arrive Point of Sale combines industry expertise, essential tasting room tools, and a whole lot of love to make running your distillery easier. Scale faster with Arrive's mobile system that offers flexible service with QR code ordering, detailed reporting, and award-winning customer support. New customers get your first month free when you launch by June 30th, 2024. Visit arrive.com/spirits and distilling and mention this ad. That's ARRYVED.com/spirits and distilling. And looking to expand into aluminum cans but worried about corrosivity, off flavors, scalping, or pinhole leaks? Atulk is a premium performance can that has proven to double product shelf life. Its manufacturing process requires no water, coolants, chemicals, or wastewater treatment. Atulk is fully recyclable and BPA-NI and PFAS free. Crafted for higher ABV products, acidic ingredients, emulsions, salt, and sulfites, Atulk is the toughest, most sustainable can for your brand. American Canning manufactures Atulk in Austin, Texas. Contact American Canning for a free compatibility visit or visit atulk.com. So, Reade, let's talk a little bit more about RTDs for distillers. We're looking at stress testing, we're looking at flavor shifts. Do you have any kind of guidance and just like recipe development, things that you look for?
My answer is no. There is no guidance, because do what your heart desires. This is the joy of RTDs, the joy of strange beverages, or DSSs, as we call them in the industry. Make something totally different, totally unexpected. That being said, be aware of pHs, be aware of possible corrosive additives, be aware of what you're packaging it into, and be aware of flavor drift. It does happen. And I myself have made something that I thought was absolutely perfect, the best liqueur I could ever make. And 3 months later, I tasted it, and it wasn't what I made. And it had changed. Sunlight is real. It does.
The sun is real. Comes from Reade.
Exactly. But it does have an effect. It does have an effect. It's crazy to think, but it's true that, like, you can have a product that tastes one way if you keep it in a relatively dark room, but it changes completely if someone on a store shelf puts it near a window. And it can be heartbreaking to realize that, like, oh wow, you were trying to help me. You put it in a place where people could see it, people wanted to taste it, all this, and they weren't getting the product that I wanted them to taste.
Right.
That's heartbreaking as a distiller.
Absolutely. And I think that's fascinating subject too, because like it's not something you can very easily explain to a customer. I'm sorry, this product shifted. But also, I think some consumers are knowledgeable about light struck beer, right? That's not something our industry really talks about for light struck products, because it might not be relevant for everything, but definitely with liqueurs,
Yeah.
Did you guys have any success communicating that with people? Did you do like returns or recall? Like what happened with that?
So with that, we were with the particular product that I'm thinking of, we were lucky enough. It was a very small batch, and we were able to recalled most of it at the time, and kind of figured out how to make it stable. This was years ago, so I'm trying to remember everything that we did. That being said, it proved to me, and I'm an example of an overabundance of caution, but I love to hold products probably for longer than I should, and probably for longer than it's reasonable for most producers. But I do not have a problem saying, okay, well, we made this, we put it in bottles, let's put it, let's take a couple of bottles, put them in hot windows. Let's take a couple of bottles, put them in the boiler room, let's do all of this, and let's check on them in a couple months. And if they're still where we feel comfortable with them, then we release the product. Like I said, that's not super reasonable for anyone, most people, but it is an ideal. It's my ideal world. Alternatively, you just gotta constantly monitor, constantly pay attention to what changes can happen to your products, and find ways to both communicate with consumers, but also communicate with distributors, communicate with liquor stores, with bartenders, to make sure that they understand that some changes happen. Sometimes they don't affect the flavor of the product. Sometimes if they do, how do you go about fixing it? You call us, we make sure it's right, we track it back. This is one of the reasons that the TTB requires that every case does have a unique number, up to, I think it's 1 million is the serial number, but they really just require a good identifier and a good batch identifier. Track your batches, track what happens to your batches if they change, track everything.
Write it down. It's sage advice for any industry, but definitely for ours. Well, the other topic I really wanted to talk about with you, because I think it's very underdiscussed, is water quality. And I know not only have you worked for larger distilleries, but you've also worked for small ones. You've also worked at a variety of regions that all have different water chemistries, different ways that they're treating their water, and different things that your facilities had to combat to deal with the water they had access to. So I'd love to just kind of dive into that topic.
Oh yeah. So now we get to the part of the conversation that I prepared for. I'm ready to talk about.
You weren't prepared to talk about liqueur you made probably 5 years ago and all the quality control problems on it.
Oh well, I'm always prepared to talk about it. I'm just not always prepared to talk about it eloquently.
Oh yes. I get that very much.
I can definitely complain about anything. I shouldn't, but I can.
Right. I won't always sound very great when I do it, but I can do it.
But yeah, so water quality, as distillers forget about water quality. They really do. And there are some distillers, I say that I'm overgeneralizing. There are some distillers out there that pay attention and know what's happening with their water quality, but there are plenty of distillers that don't. And the first thing that I tell every person that walks through any door of any facility that I work at, or just people on the street sometimes, is you need to be doing taste and odor acceptance tests. Before you use even your city water, you need to be doing these TOAs to check that the water is what you expect it to be. And I live down in Florida. Florida is well known for many things. What it's not well known for is its water quality. We have a lot of we get a lot of bog water, a lot of swamp water, and that swamp water can be infected and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, there are days that I turn on my shower in the morning and the first thing I smell is hydrogen sulfide. First thing I smell is sulfur. Every time. And it's not because the water is truly bad. It's because it's sat in the lines for a couple of days, or it's sat in the line for as little as a day. And that is what elutes out of that water. That's where, it's coming from swamps, and swamps are filled with those hydrogen sulfide bubbles, or those sulfur bubbles, and that's what's there. So before you use any water, open up the tap and just smell it and make sure it smells right. Because for my shower, if I turn it on and I smell hydrogen sulfide, after about 10 seconds, it goes away. And then I feel like I can actually take a shower. It's
You mean you don't like smelling like eggs?
Weirdly, you know what? I'm actually fine with it. It's my partner and my dog that don't like it. That's the real complaint. But it's a real problem. So pay attention before you even do any testing. And if there's one thing I can impart to listeners is just pay attention, because you'll notice if something smells wrong or something tastes wrong. That's your first line of defense. People all the time turn on hoses and just send it into whatever tank or do whatever, and they don't pay attention. Like, oh, maybe I should run the hose for a second. Maybe this is tasting wrong, and that's your first line of defense. Beyond that, so I worked in lots of facilities and lots of city water. This is the other thing. We take for granted that city water is the exact same all the time. It's not. Lots of facilities receive city water from city water plants that change their source water daily, even hourly. And those different sources can have an effect on your products, can have an effect downstream. Getting kind of out of order here, but I've worked at a facility that we knew that at around 2:00 in the afternoon, the water company for the city liked to switch from one reservoir to another reservoir, and we would see it because we'd see a little drop in pressure, and then we'd see an increase in pressure. And one reservoir was I don't want to say it was limestone, but one reservoir had a lot of calcium in it, and another reservoir didn't. And so you could see a shift in our received water by the amount of calcium. And we're talking 50 parts per million. Traditionally, 50 parts per million doesn't really register for most people, but that's a big deal to yeast. That's a big deal to the enzymes in your mashing. That changes everything about how you should be treating that water. You're talking about the difference between hard and soft water. Everyone knows that hard water doesn't quite foam up right when you're using soap, and it can leave, stone on even on stainless steel, whereas soft water doesn't. But there's other problems with soft water. I've gotten pretty deep really quickly on water, but
keep diving. I love it.
Yeah, so to keep diving on water, in the distillery, water is everything. We like to think that, the alcohol is everything. However, chances are 60% of any of your finished product is water. For finished product and for proofing, pretty much the standard is using RO water. However, you don't think about not using RO water or using city water for other projects. So let's take, for instance, mashing. Most people just use whatever the city provides you, and that's okay. You absolutely should and can use what is provided to you. However, you still need to know what's going on in that water. You need to know the ions that are in it. So I already talked about calcium. Below 50 parts per million calcium, yeast have issues flocculating. That's more of a brewer concern. But also, if you're low in calcium, the enzymes in your mash will not be effective. They won't convert your starch to sugar as well. So you need to be cognizant of what is the minimum amount of calcium I need in my water to make sure that I get full conversion. Same thing with magnesium. Magnesium and calcium they're not switchable, but they are very, very similar. Zinc is something that very few people pay attention to, but is incredibly important for yeast health. And adding a little zinc can help your yeast ferment better. Aside from that, you've also got pH. So enzymes, all of the enzymes in mashing have really strong preferences for certain pHs. And it's mostly lower pHs. If your water is highly buffered towards a basic pH or a higher pH, and you mash in, your enzymes might not be effective. And this isn't just like, your endogenous enzymes from your grain. This might be the enzymes that you're adding from exogenous sources. Like, I spend $1,000 on grain, and then I also spend $500 on enzymes to convert that grain. Well, if I'm not paying attention to the pH of my water, there is a real possibility that I'm spending $500 to do nothing, to deactivate all the enzyme. And I've seen it happen with distillers. They will have problems. They'll be like, I didn't get as much the right conversion, or I got full gelatinization, but I didn't, and even saccharification or dextrinization, but I didn't, my ferment ended high because I didn't fully saccharify, I didn't fully break down all that starch. Well, did you look at the pH of your mash? Were you aware of the pH of your mash? The pH is important. There are things you can add to change pHs. There's also things you can just do in your process. I mean, sour mashing could be argued as being added or a process step that will regulate the pH and give those enzymes the chance to break down that starch. Aside from that, you've also, if you're doing a single malt, pH will also affect the the polyphenol extraction and affect a lot of extraction from the husk. Now, there's a lot of arguments in distilling as to whether or not polyphenols and those other flavors fly over during the distillation. But what I can tell you is that distillation is an imperfect way of separating things. A lot of us like to think that distillation is, if I bring the temperature of a ethanol water solution up to 78 degrees Celsius, then all the ethanol boils off and I get no water. We all know that doesn't actually happen. But even if it were to happen, the ethanol will pull other things over. This is part of the reason why you have some, even though gluten doesn't boil in a kettle, its boiling point is something crazy high, you can see gluten in the final product. Now, there's some arguments about whether or not it's because you're operating at a gluten or in a space that has gluten just in the air because of your milling and mashing and whatnot. But you can see heavy products. I think that's probably the better way to put it. And I might say scratch all the gluten stuff, Molly, just so you know.
Yeah.
You can see heavy products that don't normally distill get carried over in a still. So you need to be aware of heavier things that you don't think are going to show up in the final product, possibly showing up. Just surprise, and these are things that the flavor concentration is parts per billion. For you to recognize. Very small amounts have very large effects on your taste profile.
And I think that topic on gluten is fascinating in itself. I don't want to get completely sidetracked by it. Because we have people come in and are like, they're gluten-free. And it's like, okay, well, that's totally fine. Like, there's no gluten in our process. It shouldn't distill over in a large enough way to harm you. But if you are celiac, that might not be true. Like, if you are highly sensitive to it, like, forget what I said. If you feel like you have problems with something that's distilled and it's from a grain source, then don't consume it, no matter if we don't think that it comes over or not. But on a different note, water is like such a fun thing because we don't talk about how it affects everything that we do, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like two specific kind of faulty things that can come through. And we talk about geosmin, right? That's something that can be in grain. It can be in water as well. And then chlorine, which is commonly found in tap water as well. Have you had experience seeing that in products down the line? Like at the beginning, I'm especially using tap water, like that's going to be present. But have you seen those carry through for final product?
Geosmin, absolutely. Once geosmin is in the system, it does not easily disappear from the system. In water, this is the thing we're talking about, flavor concentrations in parts per billion that people can pick up. Geosmin is 100% one of those. And it can come from your proof down water. It can come from water used for cleaning. It can come from all sorts of stuff, and it just pops up. Chlorine is slightly different. Chlorine is mostly used as an antiseptic in city water sources, and it works really, really well as that. The problem that arises from chlorine is it's really easy to boil off, so it's probably going to come out, like if you've got a lot of water with chlorine in it and you put it in a still, it's going to come off on your heads. That's fine. It is corrosive. It can really mess with certain metals and just gaskets and all sorts of stuff. However, it's probably going to be driven off entirely in the mashing process, or mostly in the mashing process. But then we get back to, for your process water, if you're mashing with it, or if you're watering down with it, it's designed as an antiseptic. It's going to stop enzyme activity in the mash, or retard the enzyme activity in the mash, and it's also going to have a deleterious effect on your yeast. So you might be using more yeast, or you might need to make sure that your yeast are super healthy to overtake it. Now, the funny thing is, I know distillers that really care about chlorine and pay a lot of attention to it. And I also know distillers that don't pay attention to chlorine from their city water source. Both are successful, but they do have different methods. They do have to change what they're doing. This is the eternal statement of distilling: is everything affects your product in the amount that you allow it to affect your product. So if you know it's a problem and you react to it, then it's not really a problem. If you don't know it's a problem and you don't react to it, then maybe it's a problem, but also maybe your process changes without you realizing it to react to that problem and to make sure you're still making a good product.
Right. It's kind of the problem you don't realize you have. Is it a problem really? If a tree falls in the woods, did anyone hear it?
Exactly.
And you mentioned doing taste and odor acceptance tests for water and doing those, twice a day in some facilities as required. I've actually heard multiple places doing it twice a day because of changeover. Where I live in Portland, we use Bull Run Reservoir, and that's our consistent source. We don't have changeovers. It's been that for years, so it's at least really stable. So like places like Portland, Oregon might only require once a day checks. But are there any other kind of tests that you suggest for people who are really trying to nail their water chemistry?
So in terms of checks, there's UV vis, there's a spectroscopy, there's all sorts of things that you can do to check your water, and you can run those as often as you want or as least often as you want. The truth of the matter is that checking it is great, but what happens to you if it's off the rails? What happens if, you're used to getting 55 parts per million calcium and suddenly you check it and you get 12? Well, that's below my standards. So do you stop? And the answer is no. You don't. You can't stop most of the time. Most facilities are operating at least in some continuous aspect, some sense of okay, we just keep going. We still got to make our product. I already grained in. What am I going to do I can't just wait.
Right.
So then it becomes, you can add things like calcium. You can add things like zinc. You can add magnesium sulfate. All of these other things. You can affect the pH with lactic or phosphoric or sulfuric. All types of acids. But that is still, that in my mind, that's still band-aiding the situation. The best option is to have you take in city water, you take in water of a source that or is unknown, and you run it through some sort of purification step, RO, charcoal filtering, all sorts of stuff, to get it to a level that you are comfortable with, and then you add back things. And this is an interesting thing, something that I hadn't really thought about until speaking with other producers actually at the Jim Beam conference, is that there are plenty of people that will use RO as their base water, and they assume, they use a set amount of RO and they know it's completely stripped of everything. And then they go to their concentrate, what their RO spits out, and add a set amount of that back to reach the levels of ions that they're looking for. Isn't that a great way to I'm already filtering things out, but I still want some of those things.
Just a little bit.
How do I? Yeah.
Just a sprinkle.
Which is not the amount not the amount that I want. It's a great money saver, a great way to be okay, well, I am using RO, but I'm also controlling what I'm looking for.
Right. And that's I find that so fascinating because, in an ideal world, we would have a water filtration system that was like RO, but then just added a little bit for you, right? So you didn't have to necessarily do it yourself. Not maybe perfect world, maybe just dumb fantasy, but it's fun to think about.
It's super amazing to think about. It's I love Yeah, the fantasy world is always using RO, but it's just not cost effective. It's not energy efficient. But if you're using it and using the thing that you're separating, it gets a little more cost effective, a little more energy efficient, and that makes everyone happier at the end of the day.
Exactly. Like, I think the biggest hang up most people would have about adding stuff in is just surely the cost that can accrue over time. But yeah, to be able to save a little on that cost and have the perfect filtration system, I mean, that's ideal.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually funny. So I learned about this from Brad Barron at the University of Kentucky. And he was talking about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And then literally the next week, I met a guy who worked in a culinary salt factory. They made salt from seawater. He's like, oh yeah, we use RO as well. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Wait, why do you use RO? He's like, yeah, so we create RO water and we dump it back into basically dump it into the ocean, and then we use the concentrate from the RO.
They dump it back in the ocean?
Well, because they're like, yeah, we're just trying to get the salt out of the ocean.
A thankless task, really.
Exactly. And I never thought about it, but he was like, no, so what we're looking for is to increase the salt concentration, and the concentrate, the waste of the RO is great for seeding, is great for us to add seeding crystals to. We don't have to boil it. We don't have to spend all this energy doing all this stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, we're just doing the same thing, but we're using the opposite products.
Yeah.
The true definition of one man's waste is another man's treasure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's kind of chicken or egg, right? We don't need to know who thought of it first, but it's fun to think about. Did someone from our industry go over there like, oh, this seems like very smart, I could apply it? Was it vice versa? It's just, where do ideas come from, really?
Exactly.
We don't know. Just the air, really.
I am a strong believer in the truth, in the theory that no idea is unique, but every thought is. Which, to get very philosophical, it's the concept that basically, no one ever thinks of anything truly unique. All ideas have been thought before. People have come up with every idea before, but each person's analysis and use of that idea is very unique. Paper is not useful unless you have to write something down. Mm-hmm.
Those are very true words. Well, Reade, this has been such a fun podcast. Thank you for your philosophic take on ideas and where they come from.
Yeah, I am so happy to have gotten to be a part of this. I feel like I've rambled a lot, but hopefully someone can take at least a few ideas from this and take inspiration.
I think so. And, I think that there's so much information here. I can't wait for people to listen. I know I learned something new today, so I'm sure someone else will as well. Well, again, thank you so much, Reade, for your time. And thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you again so much for inviting me.
RMS Roller Grinder has the equipment to help you increase efficiency, simplify your process, and create a quality product. Future-proof your distillery and remain competitive with Encompass Production Cloud software. Arrive Point of Sale combines industry expertise and essential tasting room tools to make running your distillery easier. And American Canning's ATELC is a premium performance can that has proven to double product shelf life. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring news stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thanks for joining us.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.